Global war ravaged the European continent. Allied and Axis powers bled their treasuries absolutely dry. Industrial titans forged weapons that blackened the very skies. Empires mortgaged future generations to finance this mechanical slaughter. Yet inside the prison camps, a soldier's daily survival hinged entirely on cigarettes. Gold and sterling meant absolutely nothing. Captured men faced a bleak existence, stripped of human dignity. The agonizing threat of starvation haunted their every waking hour. To endure this purgatory, they built a shadow financial empire. Let us unlock the grim ledgers of the prisoners. The ashes of Europe birthed an immaculate, ruthless economy where the humble cigarette became king. Barbed wire defined their physical world. They arrived with nothing but torn uniforms and exhaustion, and the German guards provided only the barest minimum rations. Black bread and watery soup barely sustained adult men. Slow starvation gnawed at their bellies and systematically broke their spirits each passing day. Yet the arrival of Red Cross parcels injected sudden liquidity into this stagnant microeconomic void. Parcels delivered unpredictable assortments of goods. Cans of beef arrived alongside chocolate bars and jam. Prisoners possessed different tastes and highly varied personal needs. A non-smoker had no use for his allotted tobacco. Desperate men traded their meager comforts just to secure enough calories to survive another week. This asymmetry of desires created the fundamental precondition for a functioning barter economy to emerge. Direct barter quickly became completely unmanageable. After trading a shirt for cheese required finding exact matches. This double coincidence of wants stalled daily economic activity. Prisoners spent hours wandering the compound, seeking willing partners. Frustration mounted as famished soldiers wasted their dwindling physical energy hunting for fair trades. A universal medium of exchange was desperately required to reduce the transaction costs of survival. Tobacco emerged as the perfect currency. Cigarettes were universally desired by the stressed prison population. They were highly portable and relatively durable during transport. Every cigarette was roughly identical in size and quality. Smoking offered a brief, chemical reprieve from the unrelenting psychological terror of captivity. Consequently, the cigarette transitioned from a simple consumable commodity into standardized, a universally accepted fiat money.
We have to check the numbers again. Look here. 9.
Prices organically stabilized across the camp. A tin of carrots cost exactly 2 standard cigarettes. A treasured chocolate bar demanded a premium of 10. Notice boards evolved into sophisticated public commodity exchange markets. Men nervously watched the exchange rates, knowing a bad trade meant going to bed hungry. This spontaneous price discovery mechanism proved that markets form instinctively wherever human beings congregate. A cunning merchant class quickly arose. Savvy prisoners began acting as middlemen in complex trades. They held stockpiles of cigarettes to facilitate camp transactions. These traders assumed risk by bridging gaps between buyers. Some exploited their peers, profiting quietly while their fellow soldiers wasted away from severe malnutrition. Arbitrage opportunities allowed these camp entrepreneurs to accumulate significant wealth within the enclosed economic system. The economy expanded beyond simple goods. Cigarettes purchased specialized services like tailoring and crude haircuts. A skilled artist traded portrait sketches for smoking rations. Laundry duties were outsourced to the most desperate inmates. Dignity was commodified as men performed degrading chores just to earn a single drag of tobacco. Labor markets naturally synthesized, pricing human effort directly in terms of nicotine and rolled paper. Complex financial instruments inevitably took root. Men borrowed cigarettes against their future Red Cross deliveries. Interest rates fluctuated based on the perceived repayment risk. Debtors faced severe consequences if they defaulted on obligations. The crushing weight of debt drove some prisoners to the very edge of psychological ruin. This primitive credit system mirrored modern banking, leveraging future promises to fuel current camp consumption. Bad money began driving out good. Prisoners realized they could manipulate the physical cigarette currency. They rolled thinner cigarettes from salvaged butts and dust. These inferior smokes were passed off in blind transactions. Deception bred profound mistrust among brothers in arms already suffering under the immense strain of endless confinement. Gresham's law manifested perfectly as prisoners hoarded pristine factory cigarettes and spent the degraded counterfeits. Camp leaders attempted to regulate trade. Senior officers created official exchange rates to prevent gouging, or they opened camp shops to standardize the cigarette prices. A rudimentary central bank was established using collective rations. These well-meaning officers tried to shield the weakest men from the ruthless predation of the market. However, artificial price ceilings frequently led to black market activity and invisible, localized supply shortages. External forces dictated the internal economy. The bombing of German railways disrupted Red Cross deliveries. A missed parcel week triggered immediate camp-wide deflationary spirals. Cigarettes became incredibly scarce, and their purchasing power skyrocketed. Despair swept through the barracks as the suddenly impoverished prisoners could no longer afford extra food. Macroeconomic shocks demonstrated how completely tethered this microeconomy remained to the volatile logistics of global war. Sudden abundance proved just as destabilizing. A massive, delayed shipment of parcels flooded the compound. Thousands of fresh cigarettes instantly entered the prison circulation. The price of a single chocolate bar aggressively doubled. The fleeting joy of new supplies was crushed by the anxiety of worthless, devalued camp savings. This classic hyperinflationary episode mirrored the catastrophic currency collapses occurring simultaneously in the outside world. Status shifted from rank to wealth. A lowly private could amass a vast cigarette fortune. Officers sometimes found themselves begging their subordinates for loans. Economic power upended the traditional military chain of command. The cruel irony of captivity was that survival often favored the ruthless over the morally upright. This inversion of hierarchy proved that capital accumulation fundamentally rewrites the social contracts of human organizations. The currency itself was consumed daily. Smoking the money supply physically shrank the total economy. Every inhaled puff represented a literal burning of capital. Deflation was an inherent, structural feature of this system. Men addicted to nicotine faced agonizing choices between feeding their physical hunger and feeding their habit. The dual utility of the cigarette created a bizarre economic paradox where money was constantly destroyed. Meticulous ledgers recorded every single transaction. Prisoners used scraps of paper to track complex debts. Accounting became a vital survival skill in the barracks. The math of survival replaced the tactics of combat. Numbers on a torn page dictated who would eat well and who would slowly wither away. These makeshift financial records stand as a testament to the inescapable human drive to quantify reality. The market operated with cold efficiency. No central authority mandated the use of cigarette currency. No government decree forced the prisoners to trade goods. The system evolved purely from desperate, collective human necessity. Even behind the towering guard towers, the primal urge to improve one's condition could not be caged. This spontaneous order demonstrates that economic mechanics are not artificial constructs, but deeply ingrained survival instincts. The delicate balance could not last. As the war turned, the entire logistical network collapsed, and Red Cross trains stopped arriving at the prison gates. The steady flow of cigarettes permanently dried up overnight. A looming dread settled over the starving men as they realized their financial system was doomed. The impending evaporation of their standard currency threatened to plunge the fragile camp society into total chaos. The Allied bombers darkened the skies. German railway infrastructure suffered absolutely catastrophic daily damage. Trains carrying essential supplies were systematically blown apart. The Red Cross parcels ceased arriving at camps. The sudden and complete supply chain collapse instantly paralyzed the internal camp economy. This external military devastation triggered an immediate, devastating deflationary crisis within the prisoner of war camps. Cigarette supplies dried up almost overnight. The desperate men hoarded their rapidly dwindling tobacco reserves. The velocity of money plummeted to absolute zero. Trade ground to a brutal and sudden halt. Without a medium of exchange, starving soldiers could not barter for life-saving sustenance. The evaporation of liquidity meant that men holding excess food could not find viable, paying buyers. Prices collapsed in a terrifying freefall. A tin of beef suddenly cost 50 cigarettes. Nobody possessed the capital to make basic purchases. The carefully constructed credit markets completely imploded overnight. Debtors defaulted as leveraged futures vanished into the smoke of bombed-out German railways. This violent economic contraction perfectly illustrates how abruptly a fiat currency collapses without consistent material backing. The psychological toll was undeniably horrific. Men who had accumulated vast camp wealth panicked. Their entire life savings were rendered completely useless. The carefully maintained social hierarchy fractured and dissolved. Merchants faced the brutal reality of starvation without their carefully hoarded paper wealth. When the economic illusion shattered, the prisoners were left with nothing but their own fragile mortality. The camp reverted to primal survival. Direct barter returned with all its agonizing inefficiencies. Fights broke out over scraps of moldy bread. The spontaneous order devolved into chaotic, localized desperation. Cooperation vanished when the pillar of mutual trust was suddenly and violently destroyed. This microeconomic catastrophe reveals how deeply our physical survival depends upon entirely abstract, shared financial fictions. Deliverance arrived with the liberating armies. Tanks smashed through the rusted perimeter wire fencing. Real money immediately flooded back into the compound. The cigarette standard dissolved in a single afternoon. Soldiers tossed away tobacco fortunes as actual food and true freedom finally returned. The liberation extinguished the shadow economy, proving that desperation is the sole architect of such systems. The ledger was finally closed forever. Men marched out of the dark prison gates. They left behind an incredibly sophisticated financial ghost. The dirt courtyards held the memories of markets. Survivors bore the dark knowledge of what desperate men will commodify to survive. The cigarette economy remains a stark historical testament to the relentless, adaptive machinery of human economics. The wire fences have long rusted, yet the lessons of these camps endure completely intact today. We often view modern economics through complex mathematical formulas. Wall Street relies upon massive algorithms and digital trading desks. But the fundamental engine driving these colossal systems remains an entirely human instinct. Prisoners of war prove that sophisticated financial structures naturally emerge whenever people struggle for basic existence. Money is not an absolute truth. It is a collective fiction born from mutual social trust. The soldiers traded their actual lungs for a psychological lifeline. They built a functional society out of absolute physical deprivation. This microeconomy protected them from complete regression into feral violence. Even in the darkest abyss of war, our mankind desperately seeks out structured cooperation. The enduring legacy of the cigarette currency is a testament to the inescapable laws of civilization. The true cost is never monetary. A generation of men brought these grim survival instincts home. They understood the brutal fragility of all established financial systems. The shadow economy demanded pieces of their souls as payment. We must remember that every ledger is written with the invisible ink of suffering. Whenever nations wage total war, the heaviest debts are paid in the currency of human dignity.
Sell it to me.
History echoes in our modern ledgers. Whenever a fiat currency collapses under the weight of inflation, whenever desperate populations turn to black markets for daily survival, the ghost of the wartime prison camp suddenly reappears. The instinct to trade, to barter, and to survive outweighs any government mandate. Economics is not merely a study of wealth, but a profound reflection of our human vulnerability. The price of power is rarely paid on the battlefield alone. It is settled in the quiet, desperate corners of captivity, where men turn ash into gold just to see another dawn. We study these bizarre microeconomies not to admire their ingenuity, but to understand the profound human trauma that necessitates them.